Millions of people think global conflicts only happen over there, right? But what about the invisible economic wires connecting a war zone thousands of miles away directly to your wallet? When conflict erupts, it creates a wildly split reality. For a select few industries, global panic sparks historic, record-breaking growth. But for local economies that rely on smooth trade and stable energy, that exact same volatility can be absolutely devastating.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive deep into the data to unpack the tale of two economies, the boom, the bust, and the very real price of conflict. We're putting two totally different ends of the economic spectrum side by side to see exactly how global shockwaves hit the real world.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering a world in conflict, the defense industry boom, building the Golden Fleet, the macroeconomic fallout, Hawaii's perfect storm, and finally, the cost of instability. We're not dealing in hypotheticals today. We're using hard economic forecasts and corporate earnings data. So let's get right into it.
Section 1. A world in conflict.
We begin our analysis by looking specifically at 2026, a year defined by the US and Israeli war on Iran, which completely scrambled global energy supplies. By effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz and damaging key facilities, this isn't just a Middle East issue. It's a massive shockwave tearing through the entire global supply chain. To put this into perspective, benchmark Brent crude surged to an average of $117 a barrel in April of 2026. Experts widely consider it the biggest disruption in global oil flows in 50 years. And that bottleneck, it's shifting economic tectonic plates all over the planet.
Section 2. The defense industry boom.
So while energy markets panic and global supply chains literally fracture, the defense sector kicks into absolute overdrive. When governments see instability, they spend big on security. Take a look at the staggering number, $12.5 billion. That was the 2025 revenue for Huntington Ingalls Industries, or HII, which is America's largest military shipbuilder. That's a 2% jump year over year, alongside a matching 2% increase in earnings per share. While everyday industries brace for impact, the defense base is reporting incredibly strong financial health. And they're not just hoarding that cash either. HII achieved a massive 14% shipbuilding throughput growth in 2025 alone. We're talking about a 44,000-strong workforce pouring over $400 million back into capital improvements in a single year. Plus, they're targeting another 15% growth for 2026. This isn't just routine maintenance, folks. This is a rapid, highly capitalized industrial expansion that spans everything from nuclear carriers in Virginia to surface combatants down in Mississippi.
Section 3. Building the Golden Fleet. To understand where all those billions are actually going, we have to look at the hardware. HII operates as the sole designer and builder of U.S. nuclear aircraft carriers, but they're also absolutely dominating the market for autonomous marine tech. They recently hit some critical milestones, delivering the Virginia-class submarine Massachusetts and the guided missile destroyer Ted Stevens. They're also building the next-gen Gerald R. Ford-class carriers for what's being called the Golden Fleet. And beyond the massive ships, they're providing unmanned Remus marine robots to over 30 countries. So yeah, this is a massive multi-domain defense boom.
But here is where the divergence becomes so clear. As defense contractors staff up and report these record-breaking backlogs, you kind of have to ask, who is paying the immediate price for this global conflict? While capital floods into the defense sector to build the future fleet, the everyday civilian economy gets absolutely squeezed by supply chain chaos and skyrocketing energy costs.
Section 4. The macroeconomic fallout. Let's look at how this translates into a severe economic bust for everyday people, using the highly exposed state of Hawaii as our main data point today. That Brent crude surge we just talked about, it pushed local Hawaiian gas prices to an agonizing $5.66 per gallon by the spring of 2026. Geopolitical shocks honestly don't stay abstract for very long. When oil gets constrained globally, it instantly translates into pain at your local pump.
Section 5. Hawaii's perfect storm.
For an isolated island economy that is fundamentally dependent on imported oil and air travel, price spikes like this trigger a devastating cascade. Hawaii can't just easily pivot and truck in gas from a neighboring state, right? Their geographic reality makes them hyper-vulnerable. Because of this shock, real GDP growth for Hawaii is forecasted to slow to a mere 1% this year. A pessimistic scenario drops that to 0.4%. That is basically a localized recession. What was supposed to be a healthy year of recovery has been completely wiped out by the weight of this energy crisis dragging down the whole state.
Looking at the latest state-level forecast data, the local labor market is basically flatlining. Non-farm payrolls are projected to grow by just 0.1%. Meanwhile, the Honolulu inflation rate is peaking near 4.8%. So what does this actually mean for you? Well, when inflation outpaces any baked-in wage gains, it effectively freezes real labor income. Workers are making the exact same amount of money on paper, but their purchasing power is actively shrinking every single time they go to the grocery store or pay a bill.
Take a second to consider the sheer weight of these overlapping macroeconomic headwinds. The forecast points out that it's not just the war. It is the compounding effect of high trade tariffs and reduced immigration strangling the labor supply, all hitting at the exact same time as the worst oil disruption in a half-century. It is literally the textbook definition of a perfect economic storm.
Section 6. The cost of instability.
And this goes way beyond abstract corporate data or GDP charts. It fundamentally alters the cost of living and vital industries like tourism, which is the absolute lifeblood of Hawaii. With jet fuel prices basically doubling from pre-conflict levels, airlines have had to adapt immediately. Carriers have slapped massive fuel surcharges on new bookings, pushing trans-Pacific airfares up by 20 to 25%. And this creates a brutal domino effect. When flights get this expensive, visitors simply stop coming. And that sends massive shockwaves straight through the local hotels, restaurants, and shops that rely entirely on those tourist dollars.
Ultimately, these global supply constraints pass directly down to the consumer, because residential electricity bills are rising as fuel costs are passed along by the utilities. The typical Hawaii household is now forced to pay roughly $100 more every single month just for basic energy needs. It's essentially a phantom tax. It restrains household spending on other local activities and actively suppresses the region's overall economic growth. It's a really stark divergence in our modern economy. On one hand, defense giants are experiencing these incredible multi-billion-dollar booms building the tools of national security. But on the other hand, everyday families and isolated local economies are left to absorb the brutal, grinding costs of inflation and supply chain collapse. As geopolitical tensions continue to rise around the globe, we have to ask a difficult question. Just how long can everyday consumers bear the crushing cost of a world in conflict? Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and always remember to keep questioning how the big global picture impacts your local reality.